Welcome into the latest episode of Betting the Pitch. I'm your host, the real _G Warner. Today, we're going to go through the Europa League and Europa Conference League semifinal second leg. So we're going to be deciding who's going not to Wembley, to I think Dublin and some other probably much smaller area to figure out exactly who we're going to win some money on. We'll do an ultimate best bet end of show, which will cover my favorite bet from the Europa League, my favorite bet from the Europa Conference League. Pick one, and then you can all grade me upon my performance. We've got unfortunately only 3 out of 4 matches because one for some reason was played on Wednesday and I completely missed it. My bad. Congratulations to Fiorentina from Serie A as Rome, or excuse me, as Italy continue to dominate European football. But in this episode, I guess there will only be one match for me to discuss in the Conference League. But I can go through the numbers where they are now, where they've moved, and then give an idea of kind of what I think the strategies will be employed from each of the teams so far. And then I think that will generally, I think the permutations when they're pretty limited. I think in domestic league campaigns, there's so many opportunities because everyone's just trying to win and get 3 points. Though it's a little different at this point in the season when a lot of teams are on the proverbial beach, more focused on their summer plans, maybe conserving themselves for Euro 2024, trying to not get hurt or something of that nature. But generally, that doesn't impact today because everyone is fighting to try to get a trophy in their team and I think personal cabinet. So we'll start in the Europa League today. Thank you for everyone coming in. If you're not a member of my Patreon, check it out, patreon.com/real_G Warner. Best spot to get all my plays, leans, write-ups, everything across all sports, including some stock stuff. Made a move, bought some Uber today. Feel like they were down and penalized based on taking some write-downs on some investments. The business is still good. Still trying to figure out when I should do a stock podcast, but that's I think maybe as the soccer season kind of winds down, that's probably my time to do it. Any feedback or concerns, interests, all that sort of stuff, please feel free to hit me on at the real_G Warner on any sort of platform. Pretty much, it's a pretty awful handle. It is there, and I think it's mine on most social media platforms. And if you're listening live, I appreciate that on Twitter, of course. But if you're listening to a recorded version out on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, leave a 5-star review. It's huge for the search rankings, and of course, subscribe to the channel on YouTube at the real_G Warner, and also on Instagram, so you can get a reel of this 30 minutes or so. I think needled down to just one single minute so I can get it on those platforms. Okay, so now with all that out there, as I just make sure that I have my setup ready for the ultimate best bet. I was a loser on the last podcast that I did for the Europa League and Europa Conference League, sadly, but it happens in this game where we're just really trying to hit 55%, I think, for the most part. Or I guess maybe a little bit better than that, but and had a push on my Champions League yesterday, unfortunately, with Bayern Munchen really capitulating late. But the Europa League has 2 matches, so let's get into it. We'll start with Bayer Leverkusen and Roma. 2-0 to Bayer Leverkusen on the road in the Italian capital in the first leg, which was thanks to a Roma poor back pass from a right back filling in for a suspended player who hadn't been playing in a while. Pretty brutal because I thought Rick Karsdorp was pretty good forehand and made a really big tackle later in the match to prevent a goal scoring opportunity for Leverkusen. But ultimately, it was not enough. And you might be able to see the Roma over my shoulder. The Roma, I guess, what do we call those things? The little things people put above their heads. Scarf, I guess. I don't really know that they function as scarves, but whatever. Anyway, in terms of this number, where we're at now versus where we were initially. So currently, Leverkusen, a 1-goal favorite at home with all the juice. Over under is 3, juice all the way to under. And in terms of where this has moved, so initial number, I saw this as Roma a 1-goal underdog, very similar price. It had climbed as high as 1.25, but we're back down to 1. It was a very juice 1.25, so that's not very different. And in terms of the total, that's had some movement. We caught some over money today. It looks like we were as low as 2.75 with most of the juice. Then it moved most of the juice to the over, and then it sort of went towards basically over money's been hitting this whole time is I guess the easiest way for me to describe it. But now we have a really important push on 3, and I think that's going to potentially come up later in the show. But important, I think, especially because This should be a tight matchup. Leverkusen are going through with a draw, a single goal loss. And ultimately, if they went to extra time, I don't think it would be as bad for Leverkusen because they're playing at home. Crowd has been nuts, which has been generally a complaint, I think, or just even a point of uh, other teams in the Bundesliga made fun of Leverkusen for not having a lot of crowd impact or crowd that even showed up. But that's changed. The Xabi Alonso effect, and maybe from just, I don't know, being in a position to win the Bundesliga and already capturing the Meisterschale. Maybe that's been a big deal. But all that I think is kind of out the window. Leverkusen have had huge crowds and have been incredibly good at scoring late goals. Now, in the first matchup, since I've already gone through where the numbers have moved. I thought Roma were playing pretty well until a big mistake on a poor back pass to the goalkeeper. Leverkusen took advantage, scored, and then scored a late goal from outside the box, which happens from time to time. They seem to have a lot of outside the box scoring. They did score this weekend. Granit Xhaka did from outside the box as well. But I mean, those are low XG events, so I wouldn't really expect those to happen too often. And for full transparency, I do have a bet on Roma to advance, which looks pretty much dead. I can get to those numbers now, I guess, before I get a little bit deeper into this, just to really just gloat on an exceptional few minutes. That back pass really killed a Roma side that I thought were progressing or controlling a game, which you could argue was supposed to happen at home. But Leverkusen were pretty defensive, and I think we're going to see that same sort of thing today. But where the numbers have gone, so I think I got a little bit better than a plus 270 close, which according to the implied odds, that was giving Roma a 27% chance to advance to the Europa League final. Now things have changed pretty significantly. So we're now in the so Roma have climbed from a plus 270 underdog, $100 would win you 270, to now that same 100 would win you 1600. So let's just say I have no arbitrage opportunity, and that is implied of about a 6% chance to get through. And this is where the huge handle on unfortunately a lot of sports books, especially with I guess with how things work in the general industry. I don't even know how to calculate where Leverkusen are. Minus 7,500. So a $7,500 bet would be required to win that same $100. So Leverkusen, gigantic favorites to move through. That number has changed significantly. Initial, I saw minus 5,000. So that's only been bet even higher. And it looks like it's pretty much a 100% gain if you had played Leverkusen minus 320 at the initial number, to say the least, more than 100 now, clearly. So in terms of to advance, that doesn't really seem like the odds makers are expecting too much here. Roma going on the road. And honestly, in that last podcast, I was talking about how having the second leg at home is a huge advantage. And I was potentially even going to sell off a Roma position if they got a good first result. I'm not really completely sold on Leverkusen. I got to say that a dominant victory on the road at Frankfurt this weekend, but it wasn't really as dominant as the scoreline would suggest. And that's pretty much how Leverkusen have played all season. They've scored a ton of late goals to win matches, to draw matches, to keep their undefeated streak alive. And what's interesting is they clearly seem to care about trying to stay unbeaten, because they could have given up in a bunch of matches lately that didn't really matter. But they've done a great job of scoring late goals. So Roma are going to have to be aggressive here. Their new manager, Daniele De Rossi, who had replaced Jose Mourinho, is a lot more offensive, because it's hard to be as defensive as the special one. But there's been a ton of goals in Roma matches that when he started, but then it kind of subsided. And I don't think that Roma have been scoring anywhere near the amount they'd want to. So that makes me think about where to go with this potential matchup. I think Roma, so just going through the permutation. So Leverkusen advance with a draw, a single goal loss, and then go to extra time if they lose in regulation by 2 goals. So that means a goalless draw, which would hit Roma +1 and the under 3. That is a really great scenario for everyone. Roma's disappointed at the end, and Leverkusen are celebrating despite coming nowhere near covering the spread. That's a nice scenario. I think it will probably see at least a goal here. Hard to bet any goalless draws, but I think Leverkusen are going to play a defensive brand, and they're going to sit back and force Roma to come at them. What that will allow is Leverkusen's pace on the counter, and it will ultimately allow, or I think it will restrict Roma's expected goals here. From a Romer's perspective, I just don't think that they're likely to throw everything forward because that doesn't seem to be this makeup of the squad. It hasn't been for a long time. We'll see, but every second that they're not catching 2 goals back or getting 2 goals ahead in this match today, then they are that much closer to being eliminated. And while they're in a Champions League race in Serie A right now, getting to the final is a big deal for them and would be another route to guarantee a Champions League spot and would certainly help Serie A, but that's not really an officiating thing to benefit here from that. As we get to 1-0 Roma, let's say, then it gets very, very nerve-wracking for Leverkusen. They probably they probably don't abandon their defensive setup, but certainly it becomes a whole new series ball game, whatever you'd call it, at 2-0 Roma or 3-1 or 4-2 or whatever that would be. And I think until then, I don't think Leverkusen are playing aggressive brand. I think we've seen them play defensively a lot this season, and I would expect them to continue that type of work up. So that's especially attractive to fade as a 1-goal favorite at home with all the juice. It looks like it's potentially going to hit back to 1.25. We don't have that yet at BetOnline. BetOnline's courtesy of BetOnline SportsBetting.ag. There are links in the podcast descriptions on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify and on YouTube. If you're not a member of either of those sites, go follow the link, sign up, make a first-time deposit, and you'll get a bonus from free money from the casino to use against them, which I always advocate. But back to this number. I think it certainly plays into Roma as a 1 goal of insurance away from home, that maybe they concede a goal on a counterattack or fall behind. I think it could get ugly the further they fall behind because the first goal for Leverkusen means 3-0 on aggregate, or a 3-goal advantage on aggregate if Roma haven't scored, and that's certainly problematic, but not as scary as I'm ultimately thinking. Total here is 3, and I think another situation we have a defensive home favorite in this case. I really like unders on defensive road favorites, but defensive home favorite here, at least their setup will be, and at least as I'm suspecting. And so I think it all pushes towards, I like the Roma side +1, but I think I like the under 3 goals more than anything here. And there's not really much for me to do on what's likely a dead to advance number. But at the same time, it's still not over until the lady of some sort sings. I don't even know. The person sings is probably what I should be saying in this world of politically correct nature. But we'll move next to Atalanta hosting Marseille, and that is the other matchup in Europa League, trying to determine who is a finalist. Another Serie A side, great year for Italy. Maybe it's a coincidence that I visited Italy in October and saw a bunch of matches there, or maybe it just follows me, the success in the world. Hopefully for that. Atalanta currently a 3/4 goal favorite right now. All the juice on Marseille on the road. Over under here is 2.5, and it is juiced slightly to over. So there's been some movement on where this number started to where it is now. Initially, it looked like Marseille were a 3/4 goal underdog, had gotten we'd seen some money coming in on Atalanta, but then it's come back on Marseille. It's been trading in a pretty narrow range at BetOnline, so not saying too much there. But the totals had a little bit more movement from even money, all the juice to the over. Even money on under has started to swell back, where clearly some under money has been bet. Some people have been eating up that even money on under. So, and maybe that's as a result of a first leg 1-1 draw, which puts Atalanta in a great position to advance here. But I don't know necessarily that I want unders with Marseille really involved. I think they are one of the scarier over teams out there, really because they don't have a great defense and they do find goals somehow. I've not been impressed by them. I think we've seen in Ligue 1 they struggled this season, are certainly in a fight, but this is their easiest, purest path to Champions League is to win this competition. The problem is they have to go to Bergamo on the road and perform today. And Atalanta, to me, are one of the best clubs in Europe. No surprise at all that they've made it this deep in the competition. I think they are really, really great in Italy and could give Inter a potential run maybe next year if they keep their team together, but it's going to fall apart, I think, pretty soon. So maybe there's some extra pride being played for, or some extra, like, I want to leave a mark on this club, and certainly advancing to the Europa League final and winning that would certainly do so. In terms of what to do with this matchup, I'm a little bit limited because Marseille at this point are a team I just don't really want to back their defense. So that makes me not really want to play under 2.5 here. It's about what I made it. I think I had 2.473214 as my model spit out. Atalanta at 3/4 goal favorite is significant, but doesn't look like we'll get a full goal of insurance to back Marseille here. And I think that we've seen Ligue 1 struggle in European competition going back for years and years and years. It's kind of surprising to see Marseille this far along. I just don't really know that I believe much in them. In terms of the strategies here, since I went so deep into Leverkusen and Roma, Atalanta are not the all-out attacking side they've been in the past, but they're a lot more pragmatic. They're a lot more intelligent, I think. Gasperini, who knew an old dog would learn new tricks, but they've been really good. And I'm still very impressed by João Musso, their goalkeeper, who's been playing Europa League, while Carnesecchi, I think Carnesecchi had won over the job in Serie A. Not a huge downgrade there. I think Marseille, I mean, they're trying their best. They have huge, high expectations, maybe the highest in Europe, which is nowhere near the performance of their club, which is a problem ultimately. But that's not, I guess, for today's issues. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of loud whistles from road fans. I think they're going to be there supporting, because what I've experienced is the road traveling fans are the most diehard of any sort of fan base, maybe across all sports that I've attended, but certainly across the soccer space, way more diehard than the home fans. But I think ultimately there's not a lot for me to do here as I come to an ultimate best bet selection. In terms of 2 advanced number, I'll get to that before I move on to officially announce who I'm looking at as my favorite from the Europa League. And thanks again to everyone for joining live on this Thursday morning. I usually try to get this out Wednesday night, but I had a date last night, and we shut down the bar, as weird as it sounds, surrounded by a bunch of SMU co-eds who had just finished a graduation party or some sort. The outfits were obscene, but I have faith in future generations that life will be good. So in terms of where this number has moved, so it looked like it closed at Marseille, a plus 170 underdog with very little movement, maybe not a lot of money getting bet on it. Minus 205 on Atalanta the other way, $205 win 100. That has changed a little bit. It's increased about 15% on average. Marseille up to plus 225, so a $100 bet will win you 225 to advance. Atalanta minus 280, so $280 to win 100. That to me, it's just basically a home team that's better and pretty highly favored. Almost makes me feel like there's not enough being required to take Atalanta to advance here. That might be my biggest interest in this matchup, rather than, I guess, probably under, because I think all these matches tend to play a lot closer than the very over-friendly betting market expects them to be. But that'll, I think, do it for this portion of the Europa League, I guess, section of the show. And for my best bet in the Europa League, I'm going to go with that Leverkusen hosting Roma under 3 goals as my biggest interest from that side. But stay tuned. Go through the lone match in the Conference League, and then I'll push them all together for a minute video to put on Instagram Reels and on YouTube Shorts. So if you're not following there, hit the real_G Warner, and then we can talk further, or you can watch me further and you can see what little editing capabilities I have. But, I think they're better than they were initially, but you can, of course, tell me that in the comments. So move to the Conference League. We already had Fiorentina advance, which was brutal because I would have liked to bet that under, and it certainly stayed under. But we have Olympiacos hosting Aston Villa. So a trip for the lone English club remaining in any of the competitions, which is hilarious and awesome. I love seeing England struggle. And Aston Villa certainly struggled in that first leg. Olympiacos won 4-2 on the road in Villa Park. It was an incredible performance from the Greeks. Certainly lower budget side, owned by Nottingham Forest owner. So who knows what's happening with money there. Doubt that there's going to be any sort of penalties for overspending in Greece, because that seems to be a-okay with everyone there based on finances and economies and such. But Olympiacos currently a half a goal underdog at home with all the juice. Over under is 3, juiced more to the over than to the under. And that makes sense because Aston Villa need a lot of goals. They're on the road. So a half a goal favorite away is significant, to say the least. Though I think, let's see, in terms of where this last matchup kicked off, Olympiacos ended up closing 1.25 goal underdog. And it looks like the total was 3 there as well. I had played under in that matchup. Honestly, it was amazing to see it lose. The striker for Olympiacos was incredible. What a great performance. I think Moroccan and Aston Villa looked really bad. They're struggling with their high line. Both of their fullbacks, I think, got caught not pushing up in time. That left Olympiacos attackers on side. El Rabi, I believe, who scored maybe a hat trick. It was a pretty great performance from Olympiacos. And we'll see if they can match that. I doubt it's probably going to be that type of level. They're going to play defensively because they got a 2-goal cushion similar to Bayer Leverkusen, but are the inferior side here. So I would expect them to really play as defensively as possible. With that said, Aston Villa have scored a ton, or at least they've conceded a ton more goals on the road. They probably are going to be put in a position where they're throwing absolutely everything forward, which is against the Unai Emery style, but I think it just means he plays a very high line, just as he has for a lot of this season, and it's worked and has Aston Villa in a Champions League position, in a only 4 slots Champions League position for England in this season. Olympiacos, I think they concede that first goal, still play defensively. Concede the second goal, probably still play defensively. And ultimately, I feel like every time they concede until they fall behind an aggregate, they are going to try to still play in a defensive low block. It's kind of what they played at Aston Villa, but I think it's a little bit overshadowed by how efficient they were in front of the net. Just from, I guess, to me, the total is really tiny, and it almost feels like I mean, I don't think based on a half a goal spread, there's certainly no suggestion here that Aston Villa win 3-0, advance in regulation, but gotta say, it feels like Aston Villa is going to be going guns blazing in. They're pretty secure in Champions League in England, so this is their biggest deal, I think, right now to win a trophy. And Olympiacos I'm sure, this is a huge windfall for them financially, and would be a really great statement to the rest of Greece and maybe the world that Olympiacos Piraeus are back. Maybe I'm not sure if anyone will take that from the Europa Conference League, but making the final, winning the final would certainly be significant. So I think my biggest interest here is under 3 goals, because I think Olympiacos are going to play defensively throughout. It is lower of a total than I was expecting. I was expecting closer to 3.5, but so that's basically through 2 numbers now. In terms of where this line has moved, looks like we're getting some over money hitting today. That's been the general direction, I think, of the total. It looks like Olympiacos have been getting bet that half of a goal has been eaten up from -115 all up to -124 currently. Maybe we see this fall to a quarter of a goal, but I expect Aston Villa and UK money to come in back in the Premier League side always. Maybe that's just a finances thing, back the team with a bigger budget. But I don't feel very good about Olympiacos getting a half of a goal at home because you need a home result, so a draw or a win to cover that spread. And to me, I feel like there's a very good chance they're celebrating at the final whistle, having lost 1-0 or 2-1 or something like that, and celebrating moving through, and it would not work out for your +1/2 bet. So my biggest interest in the Europa Conference League is that Olympiacos under 3 goals. So I like 2 unders today for the ultimate best bet. But stick around. It's time to turn that into that 1-minute reel that I've mentioned so much. And thank you. Huge outpouring of interest in the Europa League right now, live on Thursday morning, right before the matches kick off. I've been very surprised by the support, not on the podcast channel. Thank you for all the support, of course, but really for the Europa League support. That's been the most amazing thing to me. But thank you all for tuning in. And of course, this will be available soon if you want to re-listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. Please hit the follow button, leave a 5-star review, huge for the search rankings. In terms of other recording schedules, so I'll be doing a podcast tonight with Munaf Manji for pregame for Major League Baseball on the Friday baseball card. We'll be doing an episode also for the European top 5 soccer leagues, picking out best bets from each of those countries and doing ultimate best bet end of show for this next weekend, as we are running out of time. But it's been a really good run, I think, the last few weeks, month. I think I was over 57% from the last month of, and that's probably improving because I had a unblemished, I think 2-0-1 Champions League week so far. So trying to keep that going as well. But thank you, of course, for tuning in. And I think it's probably time to get into that ultimate best bet. So let's do it. Hey, this is @Real_G Warner. This is Betting the Pitch, the European soccer edition, specifically focused on Europa League and Europa Conference League semifinals leg 2. This is a Thursday broadcast. I'm doing it live day of. Thank you everyone for tuning in on Twitter at the real_G Warner. Of course, follow at Patreon, YouTube, and on Instagram. But my ultimate best bet, I select my two favorite bets from the Europa League and the Europa Conference League, one from each, and then pick them both together, throw one out at the end as my ultimate best bet so you can grade me forever. From the Europa League, I like Roma under 3 goals, and in the Europa Conference League, I like Aston Villa and Olympiacos under 3 goals as well. So not expecting a ton of goals in those matchups, at least based on those leans. If you're not a member of my Patreon, check it out, patreon.com/real_G Warner. Best spot to get all my plays, leans, write-ups, everything across all sports, inclusive stock tips, as put out an Uber buy today as well. For my best bet in this episode, I'm going to go with that Roma under 3 goals. I will see you all very soon. Thanks so much for listening. And that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. I will talk to you all very soon. See you tonight, and good luck with your bets.